listed it because
I didn't write it down on
the lines.
that.
Alright, I know we're probably not completely done. We should be done with the second one. At least the third one has a little bit of a different element to it, which is why I do want to have that whole class conversation now that some of us are starting to get through the third one. But when I look at this first one, right, I saw a lot of us very accurately say, what is wrong with this survey? Selection bias, right? Why is this selection bias?
Because he only chose landlines.
He only chose landlines, so he's going to ignore who? Younger generations, right? And so that's the idea of selection bias. We're only getting a certain section of the population, not the whole population. That's problematic. And so then we come down to the part B. So do you think the mayor will over or underestimate the true mean age of people? And so this is a difficult thing that some of us were struggling to wrap our minds around. I saw us thinking about or talking about this a little bit. Let's just say that he does the landline survey and he gets that the average age of people in that town are 50. Okay? Do you think the average age of people in that town is actually 50?
No.
No? It's probably what?
Probably 60, 70.
Okay, so let's say landline is closer to 60. But what do you think the actual average age is?
30.
40.
30?
40.
I would say 40, right? Like y'all are thinking like, oh, I'm teenagers, we're young, but you gotta remember like, there's also people who are in their 70s and 80s and 90s. My guess is it's somewhere around 40, maybe 45. So is the value that he got over or under the true average?
Over.
It's over, so we would call that an overestimate, right? Right? So we would say that the sample that he got, and this is how you want to think about it, the sample mean overestimates the population mean. When we talk about over or underestimating, it's always, is our sample over or under the population? Does that distinction help us clarify? Okay. And again, I want to point this out because this is where some of us misunderstand the way I teach, and I know we're not used to the way I teach, but first off, all of these terms of bias, did I give the names to you right away?
Yes. No.
No, remember, we did a different task, right? We started out with M&M task, and we realized, oh man, there's an issue here, and then it was like, okay, well, that's called bias, and specifically it's measurement bias. Then we did the average word length, right? And again, was there an issue there?
Yes.
Yes, and so my job after we discover these things is to help you develop the names for them to understand them better, right? This is how math actually works. It's not that someone randomly made up rules, it's that we found something and then we developed a name for it. We're finding stuff, and then I'm helping you develop the language for it. Same thing here, I let you grapple with and struggle with this idea of are we overestimating or underestimating, and then I'm clarifying or defining it further, right? So please understand the initial side of learning is supposed to be a bit of a struggle because you gotta learn how to think. And we're not used to that idea of learning how to think to figure stuff out. You're used to being told, hey, do this thing, and then you just do the thing, right? But I want more for you because you're capable of more. All right, so number 2 then, the administration at a school wants to know the proportion of students that did all of their homework. Last night they looked at a simple random sample. That's good, right? Because we got a random sample. And I saw some people say selection bias here initially, but based on the wording here, is there any part of the student population that they're ignoring? Not really, right? They're doing a simple random sample of 100 students. Send an email to each of them asking if they did all their homework last night. Of the 40 responses, 36 of the students said they did all their homework last night. So that's definitely volunteer response bias, right? Okay, so I want to point this out. Is there a way that they could reduce the effect of this volunteer response bias?
Make everybody do it.
So maybe we make them do it in class, those 100 people, and then are they more likely to respond? Yes, right? What about, and this is something I do with y'all, so I send out those parent newsletters monthly, and I actually ask them to fill out a Google survey. When I don't get a Google survey back from them, I reach out to make sure that they got the information. And guess what eventually happens? I get the information from those parents, right? And so it's one of those things that there is this volunteer response bias, and so I follow back up to try to make sure that I make that contact, because I want to work with your parents to make sure you get the best education possible. Volunteer response bias, we good with that?
Yes.
There's one other type of bias here. Did anyone go, man, I only got 40 responses, that's pretty low? It's 100 people, and I only got 40 people responding. The other type of bias here, which I'll go ahead and tell you, this won't be on the test, but this is a good thing to note, it's known as under coverage bias. Right? I didn't even get close to the majority of these students. If I had 80 of those 100 responses, I probably wouldn't think too much of it, right? I still got the majority of people responding. But do you think that those 40 people who responded within that volunteer response bias might be different than the other 60 who did not respond? Yeah, and I heard group 3 talking about this. Why would it be different?
Because those people didn't answer probably didn't do their homework.
Those people who didn't respond probably are the ones who didn't do their homework, right? They're the ones who probably don't care as much about school, so they're not going to respond to that survey. Or maybe they're like, man, I didn't do the homework and I don't want to tell them I didn't do all my homework, so I'm not going to respond, right? And so that idea of volunteer response bias and leading to the under coverage bias is going to lead into some major issues. So do you think the administration will over or underestimate the true proportion of students who did all of their homework last night? They're going to overestimate, right? We think that the population mean is less. The sample mean is, or actually proportion, the sample proportion overestimates the population proportion, again, because those who responded, right, or those who didn't respond, are probably the ones who didn't do the homework. So in this last one, the Boy Scout goes around, takes a random sample of 30 homes and visits them dressed in his uniform. What was wrong with his survey?
While he's in dressing his uniform, I feel like they would feel guilty to say anyone else, or not someone else.
100%, right? When you go up to someone in a uniform, Boy Scouts, you'd feel a little weird saying, no, I think what you're doing is dumb. Not that I think that, but you can't really say that. You would feel rude saying that to someone's face, right? So what's the one type of bias we haven't really talked about? Measurement. In a case like this, you're not actually measuring anything. When we say measurement, we're usually talking about literally measuring the length of something or counting the number of M&Ms. Measurement can also be known as response bias. You are affecting the way the people respond.
Maybe service program.
Say again?
Maybe service program.
Yeah. And so it is called measurement or response bias. And so when you're affecting the way that someone responds, that's when we call it response bias. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so again, he's going to overestimate. I don't know why we don't have any better underestimating. I'll need to fix that for the future, but he'll overestimate in that case because more people are going to feel that they need to say, hey, I support what you do. Does that make sense? We good? Alright, so that's 3.5 down. Time to move to 3.6. So what are we moving on to at this point? 3.6, which is going to cover what ideas? How what? Not how not to be biased. So we're identifying bias and just by, so like, if you can recognize how we're creating bias, then you can reduce it. What could Frank do, or what could Peter do to reduce that bias that he's introducing? Not dressed in his uniform, right? If you can identify what is causing the bias, then you can reduce it. But now we are moving on to what?
Placebo effect.
The what?
Placebo effect.
We are going to look at the placebo effect, but look at the objectives. That's a part of what?
Confounding.
Confounding, which is an issue for?
Experiment.
There we go, that's what we're looking at, right? Remember, we're focusing on observational studies versus experiments. Confounding is that issue, and so placebo effect does come up here.
Watt, the host of a great new show, Would You Fall for That, joins us now from Los Angeles. And Nick, tonight you are putting...
It helps when the video's actually up there, doesn't it? Okay, tell me this stuff.
I thought you wanted to.
Nah, I want you to.
Human behavior as the social experiment continues on this network. ABC's Nick Watt, the host of a great new show, Would You Fall for That, joins us now from Los Angeles. And Nick, tonight you are putting the placebo effect we hear so much about to the test.
That's right, Josh. I mean, you know that we're all about science on this show. Well, not quite. It's a lot of fun as well. Tonight, the placebo effect. If you think something's going to make you feel better, then it might. And it's summertime, so for this one, we headed to the beach.
We set up a booth on the boardwalk at the beautiful Jersey Shore one sweltering hot day. We told vacationers we're shooting an infomercial for a fabulous new energy drink. We had t-shirts and posters. We even had our very own With Power energy drink banner set. Oh, and one tiny little secret. With is nothing more than club soda. If you believe a pill will make you better, then it just might. If you believe an energy drink will make you stronger, it just might. Even if it's just club soda. It's a great trick our minds play on us. So all we did was tear the labels off of club soda bottles and stick on our own. Whipped. Would you fall for that? Would you actually feel stronger after a few gulps? You will be amazed.
What we got going on right here is the Whipped Energy Challenge. We're promoting a new drink, and it shows immediate results. Who wants to step up and take it? It's totally free. Who's got?
First up, we invite our passers-by to test their strength of the classic carnival high striker. Swing the mallet, try to ring the bell.
7, now Keith, that's respectable. It's not stellar. So Shearer's going to give you some whiffs right now, and we will increase your whiff for this.
Whiff, 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 whiff. So he chugs the whiff, and I tell him some highly convincing nonsense about what's in it.
It was discovered by Philip Monroe, who won the Tour de France in 1998.
Then we get him to shake his thing, get the whiff pumping through those veins.
Punch all those distractions out of your life. Don't punch me. Punch everything else though.
Then to the high striker, see just how much stronger whiff has made him. Will he get a better score?
Stand back, boys. Keith is on fire.
Yeah! 10! Ding dong. Just like that, Keith has become a strong man. If you're wondering if we rigged that high striker, the answer is absolutely not. It's the placebo effect at work, and Keith fell for it.
And also tonight, I think one of the most terrifying things I've...
Alright. So let's look at the questions. We'll do this as a whole class, so we gotta catch up a little bit. So describe what you saw in the video. Why do you think the people in the video got stronger?
Because it's in their head.
It's in their head, right? did they actually take anything to make them stronger? No, right?
Mind telling them.
Huh?
It's what their mind's telling them.
It's what their mind's telling them, right? Nothing made them stronger. But they believed they were. Okay? So they kept calling this, well, actually, one thing I want to talk about really quickly is, why is this an experiment? KJ, you awake over there?
Yeah.
Taking notes? Jelani, you awake over there? Taking notes? Come on, guys. So why is this an experiment? What needs to be there for there to be an experiment?
Independent
Trying to,
variable.
an independent variable and a dependent variable that we're trying to establish
Cause and effect.
cause and effect, right? So what was the independent variable in this case? Not the person. So we're going to talk more about this, but like when we talk about the independent variable, we're talking about the treatment, the thing that was applied to the test subject. The drink, right? Okay? That was our independent variable. What was the dependent variable that we were measuring?
Person.
What about the person?
Their strength.
Their strength, right? How far are they able to hit the, what is that thing
I
called?
don't know. That's a meter.
The hammer thing, right? That thing. So that's our independent, that's our dependent variable. However, was there even anything in the independent variable, the treatment? No. That's where we get this idea of a placebo effect. Nothing actually in the treatment. So we want to see if it's a mental thing. They do that a lot when they're testing new medicines. Sometimes just tricking your brain to think that you're taking a medicine that will help you get better, will help you get better. They do that sometimes, okay? Because if you don't need to put medicine in your body, there's no need to, right? Like, there's no sense in doing that. So we test out the placebo effect, the idea of this water in this case. They just thought they were stronger, so they were able to do more.
I just learned about this in psychology.
There's a lot of overlap between psychology and statistics. Because you need studies. You need,
I go there next.
huh?
I go there next.
Who teaches that here?
Miss Kelly.
Gotcha. Okay. But Mr. Wilcox is trying out a new facial hair ointment to make his beard grow faster for No Shave November. At the end of November, his beard is 3 inches long. He concludes, since his beard grew 3 inches, the ointment must have worked. What's wrong with his reasoning, though?
He
Wait,
never
it
lied.
does say November.
It could have grown that much without this stuff.
He could have grown that much without the stuff, so,
He may have a lot of testosterone.
okay. So, does he actually know that the beard oil, or is that what it was? The facial hair ointment is what caused this thing? No. What would he need to do in order to accurately determine if it was the facial hair ointment?
Shave all his beard off.
He need to test it with it and without it.
Ah, we need a comparison, right? And that's what we want to think about is a control group. That's what that's called. A group or test to compare against. That's an important part a lot of time for experiments. So let me ask you this. Could, if we're trying to test this theory out, could I do the facial hair ointment and DJ does nothing and we see how No Shave November goes?
No.
Why not?
No.
Yeah, you have actual facial hair.
I actively grow facial hair, right? Like that's a normal thing for me. So notice we can't directly compare us because that's gonna introduce what major issue within experiments?
Right.
Not bias.
Confounding.
Confounding. What is the confounding? Well, DJ's facial hair growth versus my facial hair growth. Do I care about DJ's versus my ability to grow facial hair?
No.
No. So we need to compare me to me. And that's where this control group comes in. So what could he do instead?
Could he like shave and then?
Oh, well, but is shaving going, how is shaving in the beginning, November gonna tell him if it was the ointment versus just his ability to grow facial hair?
He needs to do
He cut it off,
experiments
he cut it
instead
off,
of
and
one.
let it grow out.
Maybe go 1 month without the oil and then
So maybe 1 month without oil and compare to a month with oil. That's how a way that he could reduce, or he could create a control group, something to compare against. Notice, and one thing I should make a note about is the control group. That's a group or test to compare against, and so no treatment is applied, right? Notice how one of these times he doesn't get the oil at all. And so we just want to see what would naturally happen without that treatment.
They did that on Grey's Anatomy with Richard Weber and Adele.
I'll trust you on that. Alright. Can anyone think of another way that we can introduce a control group to compare against?
I would say he could find somebody that actually do grow hair.
It's possible.
They may not grow at the same rate he does.
That's the issue, right? That's that issue of confounding.
Well, he could do it on like someone else. Doesn't necessarily have to be
You
him.
could just test someone else. And I will say, we could test multiple people, right? And look, and does anyone remember what that term is when we test multiple subjects?
What is that?
Replication.
Replication, right? He could replicate the study. Half his beard gets oil, half does not. Does that give him a control group to compare against?
Yeah.
Yeah? So that gives us a control group. Now again, do I want to compare DJ's ability to grow facial hair versus my own? No. But what if I had lots of people in the study, right?
You wouldn't compare the people to
If
the
you-
people. You're comparing their own stuff.
Well, maybe if I do this, but could I like have it so that I just average the facial hair growth of one group versus the other group? By having replication, by having multiple subjects, lots of subjects in one group and lots in the other group, then yes, I could more accurately compare those two treatments, or the no treatment versus the treatment. Do I want to just like choose who goes into which group though?
No, you need to
Random.
Randomly,
say
not select, assign. So remember, sampling and selecting go with observational studies. Assignments, right? So I randomly assign them to different groups. That's what goes with experiments, right? And it's a small distinction, but it's important. So could test lots of subjects, right? With versus without oil. And noting, again, that's replication, and randomly assign to treatments. That process will help us reduce the effects of what?
Confounding.
Yep. So moving down to number 3, in a recent medical study testing the effectiveness of a new medication, researchers gave participants either the new medication or a sugar pill. When participants came to get the pills, they were told whether they had been assigned to the medication or to the sugar pills. At the conclusion of the study, researchers found the medication was more effective than the sugar pill. Are the results valid? Jaden, what idea were they trying to test with having the medication versus the sugar pill? Huh? Jaden, yeah. No idea? Okay, let's focus up. So my question is, if we're doing the medication versus the sugar pill, what effect are they trying to test there? Say again? Not the same thing they're testing in the last one.
Placebo?
The placebo effect, right? See how there's one, the placebo effect is there's nothing in the treatment? Which one doesn't have anything in the treatment? The sugar pill, right? They're trying to test the placebo effect. Is it actually the medication that's working or is it not? Did they do a good job of using or testing the placebo effect? Why not?
They gave some just sugar pill or
Well, the sugar pill would be the placebo effect, right? They're testing the medication versus the sugar pill. Say again? They told them. If you tell someone, hey, you're not getting the real medication, are they going to mentally believe they're getting the medication?
No.
So is the placebo effect going to play into that?
No.
No, right? So I would highlight this detail here, right? They were told whether they had been assigned to the medication or not. This invalidates testing for the placebo effect. That's huge to note here, is that we're invalidating the whole thing.
That's what Richard Weber did. He snuck into the little closet and switched his wife's medicine because they were doing a trial for Alzheimer's. And he worked at the hospital that they were doing it at. So
I
he
do
snuck
remember
in there.
that portion.
and-
I thought that Meredith switched it.
Well, then he told Meredith to.
Yeah.
He did tell Meredith too.
Yes,
I
because
hate that I know this, but my wife made me watch several seasons and then we stopped and then we went back and they were like, oh, I'm done.
I love Grey's
I'm
Anatomy.
agree with that.
Yeah, I think we got like,
it's just too long.
it's too much, man.
I look at it, like I look at the season, I can't start.
And the drama is just, it's too much.
But,
The first few seasons were okay and then I was like,
You
"Alright,
need
I'm
to
done."
watch Clickbait. I just watched it. It's on Netflix. It's so good.
Is it a movie or
You need to
show?
watch
It's a
Zoo.
series.
You seen Zoo?
Huh?
Zoo, that's a weird, it's wild.
It only has 8 episodes.
Hey, episodes.
So,
What was it?
I do want to point out, because I did think about this afterwards, Jaden, you are correct that it is doing a similar thing to up here once we introduce the control group, right? So we're testing, we have a control group where there's no treatment applied, right? So that is involved here, and then there is the treatment of getting the medication, but we're going a step beyond that with that placebo effect. They really are now just doing a control group, they're not testing for that placebo effect at all. It's invalidating it. Does that make sense? So you were definitely partially onto something there. So number 4, identify any possible variables that could be the cause of the correlations below. So A, those people who tend to carry boxes of matches in their pockets also have a higher risk of cancer. I mean, like realistically, do you think the matches are causing the cancer? No. So what would be the variables that are confounding this study?
What the matches are used for.
Okay, so what are the matches used for? What are they probably used for? Smoking. You can literally just say smoking kills, right? It's not about the matches that are causing the issue. It's about the smoking that goes along with those matches, which, let's be real, I think most people use a lighter, not matches, but
Yeah. They use matches for candles.
matches for candles. I will also say if you ever smoke cigars, you typically use matches for cigars because that way the lighter fluid doesn't affect the flavor of the cigar. So, but again, cigars can cause mouth cancer as well. It's not lung cancer because you don't inhale the cigar smoke, but it can definitely cause mouth cancer. So smoking is probably causing the cancer.
Try that before receiving.
What, cigars?
Yeah.
Yes. I haven't done it in years, but I like the smell and flavor of the cigar. When I got to college and I was old enough, I did it. People who drink diet sodas tend to have a higher body mass index. Do you think it's is it really the diet sodas that are probably causing them to have a higher BMI? But I mean, they're drinking a diet soda, so they're not getting the sugar. It's them? What do you mean? They're drinking diet soda because they want to lose weight, right? Notice it's almost the reverse of what they're saying. The higher BMI is probably causing them to drink diet soda. That's a huge thing to notice, right? Is there a correlation there between drinking diet sodas and a higher BMI? Yes, that's a correlation. There's some relationship, but it's not that the higher diet sodas are causing them to have a higher BMI. Is there a correlation between carrying boxes of matches and higher risk of cancer? Yes, there's a correlation. There's some relationship, but it's not causing, right? And I want to point out that each of these three statements are actually very accurate. Okay. This last one, students who eat dinner with their family often are more likely to have better grades. You don't think that's true?
No, because I eat dinner with my family and I have a seat in here. That's
Okay.
not true.
You're not the norm, and also that's in here right now temporarily while we're still growing and learning and getting used to how I teach. But that's actually a very true statement.
How?
I ain't never heard of that before.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't eat dinner with my family. I got a good grade.
Huh?
We'll eat.
Okay, hold on a second. Are you looking at students as a whole, or are you looking at just you? Just you, right? Could you be a biased sample in comparison to the population? Yeah? So you is not necessarily indicative of everybody? Yeah? Okay. So we need to recognize that you're looking at yourself. So here's the thing I want you to think about. Who are the people who are not able to eat dinner with their families?
People who don't care about me.
Okay, people whose